All right, welcome everybody. My name is Patrick Horne. I'm a nurse practitioner at the University of Florida in Gainesville. Thanks for joining me today. I'm going to take you through an abstract from SLLD entitled Validation of the Worst Itch Rating Score, otherwise abbreviated as WI-NRS, and related patient-reported outcomes, or PROs, to assess the severity and impact of pruritus in patients with primary biliary cholangitis, otherwise known as PBC. So just some quick background. You guys are probably familiar, but cholestatic pruritus is very common in patients with PBC and is very impactful on their quality of life. And it often leads to many issues, including things like sleep disturbance. It's underrecorded. Pruritus is underrecorded, and we really don't have well-validated instruments to sort of assess the true level or severity of pruritus in these patients. This particular abstract was wanting to look at validating some psychometric PROs, specifically, as I mentioned in the title, the worst itch NRS, but also looking at a modified PBC-40, which is typically at a 4-week recall. But in this particular study, they looked at it as a 7-day recall. And this was all part of a phase 2b GLIMMER study. So again, the aims were to psychometrically validate the following PROs, as we mentioned, the WI-NRS, as well as the PBC-40 with a modified recall, to measure and assess the severity and impact of pruritus in patients with PBC and cholestatic pruritus using data from the GLIMMER study. So within the NRS PRO, they were measuring pruritus related to sleep interference, as well as fatigue NRS, as well as the worst itch, as I mentioned. And then, as I've already alluded to, the PBC-40 was used, but was modified to a 7-day recall instead of the typical 4-week recall, which has been previously validated. This is a phase 2b study, double-blind, placebo-controlled, looking at linarixabat in patients with PBC and pruritus. So if you turn your attention to table 1 to start with, these are the PROs we talked about, and this is how the measures were used in GLIMMER. So the WI-NRS was looking at worst itch, rating from 0, meaning no itch, all the way up to 10, which would be the worst itch imaginable. This was captured twice daily from days 1 to week 20 through an e-diary. The sleep interference NRS was also measured from a scale of 0 to 10, again, 0 being no interference in sleep and 10 being completely interfered. But this was recorded in the mornings, daily basis via e-diary. Fatigue, again, 0 to 10, but recorded in the evenings only via e-diary. And then the PBC-40 with the modified 7-day recall was a question in 6 domains. So symptoms, itch, fatigue, cognitive, social, and emotional. And those were scored from 0 to 5. And these were done monthly at each study visit from visit 2, which was day 1, up to visit 7, which was week 20 for the entire study period. As we get into the results, let's look at figure 1. This is the baseline demographics for the patients. Pretty standard, I think, for a PBC patient. The mean age was about 56, overwhelmingly female, 94%, as you would expect. Typically overwhelmingly white in terms of race, 70% in this particular study. Their WI-NRS score, the mean was about 5.5, so somewhere right in the middle of that 0 to 10 scale. And I found this interesting, that the duration of PBC in these patients in years was just over 7.3 years, and their pruritus was about the same at 7.4. So these are patients who have been diagnosed with PBC for just over 7 years and really have suffered pruritus probably the entire duration of that diagnosis. So as we move over to figure 2, I want to skip over a few things, and I want you to look at, this is comparing the WI-NRS score to some other known tools that we have, such as the 5D itch, as well as the PGI-S score. The PGI-S score is not one you may be as familiar with, but it stands for the Patient Global Impression of Severity score. And what you can see is, as expected, the WI-NRS correlates very well with these other validated studies, so the 5D itch as well as the PGI-S score. So as we conclude, the results from this psychometric validation study support the reliability, the validity, and the responsiveness of the WI-NRS score. Pruritus-related sleep interference as well as fatigue NRS and that modified PBC-40. So the analysis strongly supports the use of these PROs as assessments for patient-centric trial endpoints, and they're actually going to be using these moving forward in their phase 3 GLISTEN study with linarixabat for pruritic treatment for patients with PBC. Obviously, routine clinical assessment and symptoms and quality of life are important, and the hope is that by continuing to monitor those, this will improve the care of patients with PBC. And that concludes our presentation. Thank you for listening. And for more information, please visit the GAP website.